Hey y'all, it's Katie. Welcome back to From My Vanity and welcome to another Palette Palooza, this time for February. I'm so glad that you guys had such a good response to my first initial Palette Palooza, which if you want to get another video full of just reviews on eyeshadows, I'll leave it linked up here if you want to see my original Palette Palooza video. You guys had so many nice things to say about it, and I just thank you guys so much for being so supportive, and you guys just made me feel so happy that day when I posted that video, and you guys are so on board with the new series. So here we are for another video in the Palette Palooza series. As I said, we're doing this for February, so all the palettes that I tried from the month of February, I'm going to share my reviews with them for you today. I'm going to be sharing with you guys my review as well as arm swatches, and then also all the eye looks that I created with these palettes, at least the ones that I remember to say. But yeah, we have 6 palettes that I was able to try out this past month. Well, it was like 5 and then a little quad. But anyway, 6 palettes to talk about today, so we can just jump right into it. Also, to explain the hat, I'm not a big hat person. Like, I wish I was the one to like be a hat person, but I just feel like I don't pull it off very well. But I have like 1 or 2 in my collection, and they come in handy for days when my hair is needing a wash so bad it looks terrible, so hence the hat. But anyway, let's just move right on to it. Originally, like in the first video, I went in no particular order, but today I'm going to go from worst all the way up to best and kind of do a little countdown. Let me know if we like that. But anyway, let's jump right into it. Coming in at number 6 is the Stilazzi Spellbound eyeshadow palette. Now, this palette isn't terrible. I don't want it to come across as that, but out of all the eyeshadow palettes that I did try this month, this does come in at the very bottom just because I had a couple issues and just things that I ran into or encountered when using this that ended it at the bottom of the barrel, basically. The matte formula in here is a very sheer type of matte formula, which isn't necessarily bad, but I did feel like it just, even when you built up, it almost didn't give a whole lot of pigmentation, if that makes sense. Like, you could build it up to a certain extent, but even with the color on your eyes, it almost looked like it was sheer, if that makes sense. I feel like if you've ever like experienced an Anastasia palette or the Juvia's palette Zulu, like, they're so pigmented, and even if you go on lightly, if you build it up, whatever, there is a good layer of product on there. Whereas for this, I just felt like I would blend it, and while there was color depositing and you could see the color, it was just a very thin formula. Like, it felt very sheer, almost like I could see my eyelid underneath. I hope that makes sense, but that's what I experienced with the mattes. They are nicely pigmented, so I don't, like I said, I don't hate this palette. It just wasn't my favorite to work with. It is a very neutral palette, as you guys can see, but there are nice pops of colors, which is great to get a nice variety with this palette. But one thing I did notice is that these deepest colors, when you are trying to mix them into the like transition or the next shade darker, it's a pretty stark contrast, for especially for the black and the purple. And even this brown, when you put it on your eye, it comes out pretty darn dark. But I noticed that I had difficulty blending the darkest shades into like getting a seamless blend from the dark shade to the next darkest shade and really blending that out and making that nice gradient that I like to see. And if I work too hard of it, I noticed it especially with the brown, but sometimes if I work too hard to blend it out and to pack it on and try to build it up, I noticed the brown would get a little patchy in some areas, and so it was just a little finicky. Like, the darkest shades in here weren't my favorite. The shimmers were nice. They're nothing intense. They're definitely not like an intense metallic, but I mean, they're a nice, very shimmery formula. They're not metallic, they're shimmery. With wetting it, it can get it definitely a good bit more intense, but I just noticed, especially when I applied with a brush, they were a little toned down, so I tended to either do a cut crease so I had concealer underneath it to really make them pop, or I would wet the brush or something like that, and then they gave it a little bit more shine that I like to see. When I put shimmers or metallic, I like metallic, honestly. Shimmers are just a little understated at this day and age. I feel like metallic is where it's at, or foiled is where it's at when it comes to these types of formulas. So these were just very soft, but like I said, you could wet them and they built up and, you know, stood out a whole lot more. So I did like that about it, that I could get them to where I like them. Something to note with this is that there is a ton of fallout when you are creating your looks. Even though I would tap it off, especially in the areas like outer corners where I was really trying to pack it on, I noticed a ton of fallout falling onto my cheeks. So if you're someone who does your face first, definitely something to keep aware. I would recommend not doing it. And another thing for these, I felt like they perform best, especially if you wanted to deepen up the outer corner, they perform best if you put down a concealer base and let it dry a bit. They need something tacky to stick with. I don't think you will enjoy the looks you create if you ever like go in with a set eyelid. For example, like if you put your eyeshadow primer or concealer down and then you set it with something really light and then try to go in with the rest, I don't think that these are going to work very well, because I just found that whenever I kind of did a shade initially, if I tried to go with a deeper shade on top of that, it didn't want to stick as easily. Like, it really performed best when I put the darker shades down first and then kind of used the lighter shades to blend out and buff it out, because whenever I use it the other way, like I said, the deepest shades just didn't want to stick as well as when I put it down initially on that concealer, that kind of tacky concealer base. But the looks you get are really pretty, and I was impressed with the wear time. I didn't have any issues with fading or creasing with any of the eye looks that I did, which I always like to see in a palette, so that's always really nice. So I would say if you're someone who likes neutrals and you're wanting to step out and get into more color, this would be a good palette to go with, because there are those colors in here along with a bunch of neutrals, so you could mix it up. You can do really neutral and then just do a pop of blue on the lid, or you could do a more colorful crease and then, you know, do like, you know, something nude on the lid. It does give a lot of versatility, especially if you're someone who is in neutral and wanting to explore color. I feel like if I had gotten this palette over a year ago when I was still in neutrals and transitioning to colors, I would have absolutely loved this, because it would have still made me feel comfortable, but I would still be exploring color and getting my toes wet. So overall, like I said, I don't think this is a terrible palette, but considering all the eyeshadows that I did try, all the little issues that I had along the way, you know, with the mattes and whatnot, I was kind of underwhelmed, and I think maybe I hyped it up too much in my head, so when I actually got it and used it, I was just kind of like, I don't know, it's just not wowing me as much as I thought it would when I initially got it, and I was excited to start and jump in. As I was creating all the looks, I was just kind of like, that's nice, like, okay, like this works, it's nice. So that is why it landed in the 6th spot at the bottom of the countdown. I forgot to move over because I do share eye looks that I created throughout the day, so I usually put them here. So I was probably driving editing Katie crazy because I didn't scoot over enough, so she can't put it in there, so sorry about that. But anyway, we're scooted over now. Let's move on to the next palette that I want to talk about, and it is the Sigma Warm Neutrals Volume 2 Eyeshadow Palette. This little baby right here is a really nice palette. It's definitely a neutral palette, which is kind of not my vibe right now, but I didn't mind it. I did really enjoy this very vibrant red. It was a really pretty shade. The pigmentation on both the shimmers and the mattes are really nice. Like, it just takes the tiniest of touch, and there is so much pigment on these. They come off very easily. I was very impressed when I swatched these, when I was just kind of dipping my fingers. I was very impressed with how they were looking on my fingers. Blending them on the eyes is also really gorgeous. I thought that it was really nice how they blended into my crease. They blended into, you know, the shimmers blended into the mattes. There was no weird harsh line, which I really appreciate, because kind of like the Stilazzi where the mattes can be really sheer. I forgot to mention this with the Stilazzi, so I'll just mention it now. But with these, when the matte formula is so sheer, it kind of makes it hard to blend the shimmer into the matte, especially when you foil them, because it just almost leaves like a step, if that makes any sense. Like, it's so thin and sheer, and then you put on this thick metallic that where it stops can look funky. So that is something I forgot to mention over there. But with these, because the pigmentation of the mattes were so rich and it didn't look sheer on the eyes, I didn't notice any kind of weird funkiness trying to blend the shimmers into the mattes. It all blended very seamlessly, and I did like that. One thing to note with this though is that every now and then I did have an issue with the blending the darkest shades kind of into the other shades. And I don't know if it was maybe something on my end, because it didn't happen every time and it would just kind of be randomly, but I feel like it was only with this deepest brown. So that's just something to note, that every now and then I would just get one area that kind of stuck more than others. But on the days when I didn't have any issues blending, it was a very nice and easy way to blend these into each other. I didn't have to spend too long blending them and meshing them together to get that nice ombre, so I did like that about it. One thing I will say though is that these two shades annoy me so much, and I know this is because maybe I'm just so far from neutrals right now, but these two shades, this is like a shimmer pink shade and this is like a metallic pink shade. But when you like wet them on your eyes, like, there is such a slight difference. Like, they're the same color, they're just a little bit of a different finish. I did a look once with like this on the inner corner, then I bled this all over and did a cut crease on the lid and stuff, and you couldn't tell barely a difference. Like, you really had to look and be like, oh yeah, this one's shimmery and this one's very metallic. Like, that's how close they were. So that was just, in my opinion, such a waste of a pan for me. I really wish they had stuck something else in there, like anything else in there. Overall, I do think this is a nice palette, and if you are a neutrals girl, this might just be the perfect thing for you. It is $39, which I feel like is a little bit pricey. You get a lot of pans in here, but I would still say that try to wait for a really good sale. I feel like I frequently see 20 or 30% off like coupons going around at the Sigma website, so definitely wait until you can get that discount on this, especially if you're someone who is very much into neutrals, you don't like to step out too much. I feel like this gives you a nice variety, and it would make like a nice travel palette, because you get, you know, some more bright colors if you want to get exciting, but you have like your staple matte kind of cream shade, you have your inner corner highlights, you have these shades to deepen up. So yeah, anytime I pick this up, I just would kind of think back and be like, yeah, I probably would have loved that back in the day, but now it's just a nice palette. It's definitely quality-wise, I feel like better than the Stilazzi. I definitely like the formula in here a lot more than the Stilazzi one, but the Stilazzi one, you get more variety. So it really all depends. Okay, so next one, as I said, is the little quad that I have. I got this from Crystal. It is the e.l.f. Matte for Plum little quad here. It is an all matte quad eyeshadow. It has a cream, a gray, a like mauve tone, and then a kind of a smoky black. It's not a true black, but it's a nice little quad, and I'll leave linked up here the video where I wore this. I wore only this palette in that look, and I really smoked it out. I did like a matte cut crease, very smoked out on the outer corners, and I like the look, but it definitely was neutral. Like, it was pretty, but at the same time I was like, I want to add glitter to this, like I want to add something to it, but I didn't want to. Like, I wanted to force myself to leave it just from this palette, and I think it still turned out really pretty. And if you're someone who doesn't like color, that's probably going to be right up your alley, but I felt like this blended pretty darn nicely. There was a little issues with the gray and the black. I felt like nothing serious, but when blending them, I definitely felt like they were almost too pigmented, which can be a good problem to have, but they were very pigmented, and so I felt like when I tapped into them, I really wanted to hit them off before blending them in, or I felt like it just could get muddy too quickly and just kind of look like a gray blacky mess. So it's definitely something I want to caution you about. But overall, for this, I want to say it's like $2. They used to be $1, but I think they're now $2. For the price, I was blown away. Like, my end result I thought looked very pretty. I didn't have any kind of patchiness issues. I thought it blended very nicely. Yeah, I seriously can't have any complaints. And also at the end of the day, when I washed my makeup off, still looked beautiful. The longevity is great there too. So overall, I can't fault this at all. It's just, you know, kind of not my style because it's so neutral, but the quality is definitely there. And for $2, like, seriously, like, this is a good buy. I only did 2 looks with this because I figured it's a quad. I felt like 2 looks was enough, so maybe that wasn't a whole lot, and maybe I should have tried it more, but I did create 2 different looks with it, and I felt like both times blended really easily. I had no issues. I thought they swatched very nicely. I thought they performed well, and I thought it was a nice little mix to get a very cool tone eye look, which I feel like people are wanting to make trendy again. So I feel like if you're wanting to kind of jump on the cool tone train, pick this up and you can already be there with these grays and this very cool tone mauve. So anyway, overall, very impressed with this, and I can say I do highly recommend it. It's just in the number 4 spot because it's just not really my tones. Okay, next up is Spectrum palette from Prism Makeup. This is a relatively new brand, at least very, very new to me. A branch off from Juno & Co., who created that whole microfiber sponge. But this is the palette, and the Prism Makeup, as far as I have seen, is basically like a dupe brand, kind of like Bad Habit, and in this case they, as you can see, are duping the Prism palette from ABH. I have a couple other palettes from Prism, but this was the first one I wanted to try because it is the Prism palette. Oh, this is so confusing. This is a Spectrum palette, but it's duping the ABH Prism palette, and this is the Prism brand. Very confusing, but anyway, I wanted to try the Spectrum palette because it was supposed to dupe the ABH Prism palette, and you guys know I have the Bad Habit Aura palette that's a dupe for the Prism ABH palette. Boy, this is getting confusing. But anyway, I have the Bad Habit dupe of it, and it's just not my favorite. So I was really curious to see if I would like this one more, and spoiler alert, I do. There were 2 days when I was doing looks that I actually grabbed my Bad Habit palette out and I did one on both sides. And while they both looked almost identical, I love this formula way more than I love the Bad Habit. The Bad Habit, I feel like, is so insanely powdery. Like, their mattes are so insanely powdery, but they just puff off and just, they don't want to stick down as well. As opposed to this one, they're not as pigmented and powdery as the Bad Habit, but they stick down easily and they build up so quickly. Like, it doesn't take a whole lot of effort to build these up to look just as intense as the Bad Habit side. And like I said, the Bad Habit side, I feel like even though when you pick it up on your brush, it's so intensely pigmented, when I was blending it in, I felt like I was just kind of blending all the color away. So I did, like I said, I used both palettes on 2 different eyes, 2 different days, and both times they turned out looking pretty much identical. Like, the most you could tell was a bit of difference in the shimmer, and I like the shimmer formula in this one way more than the Bad Habit dupe, because the Bad Habit dupe just sits on, it's like so thick and it sits on top of my skin. I feel like it just makes my eyelids look really thick and crepey, whereas this one lays a lot nicer, so it's not as intense, but it doesn't create 100 different little lines and crevices in my skin either. So I really, really preferred this one. Okay, so I don't want to make this whole review all about comparing this to the Bad Habit, but suffice to say, I like this one way more than the Bad Habit. So formula-wise, I thought this was really nice. The formula is definitely thin, like the actual formula, but it builds up really nicely, and you can see me use these mattes and the shimmer in my Get Ready With Me. It was like a chit chat Get Ready With Me. I'll have that linked up here if you want to go watch it. But I found it very easy to build up, very easy to apply, very easy to blend and intensify with the deeper shades. I didn't really come across any issues blending the deepest shades into the lighter shades and creating that ombre. And also lasting power. When I washed my face off at night with these looks, it still looked the same. I had no fading and no creasing. I will say though that for this formula, I did have to use a glitter glue because it is that type of metallic kind of foiled formula that is almost it's not silicone-y, but it is almost that like creamy consistency that if I put it on my eyes, because this eye is a little more hooded, I will get a ton of transfer into my crease by the end of the day, which I personally just don't like, especially if I take the time to cut my crease. I don't want it transferring all over the place. So I did use a glitter glue, and that did pretty much solve the problem. Still, I would say the last maybe 2 hours at the end of the night, I could see some transferring, but for the most part, for the majority of the day, it didn't have any transferring, and that was just fine for me. I think the only other thing I wanted to note is that there is fallout, and there is a good bit of powder kick-up in the pan. I feel like I always forget to mention those things when I review because they don't bother me, because I always do my eyes first, so I am really bad at remembering to mention that in my reviews, but I did want to try to say it when I can remember. But yeah, there is a good bit of fallout, so I would say either tap this off very well or just do your eyes first and then your face afterwards. But overall, I was pretty impressed with this. I really enjoyed the looks I created, and overall, I'm happy to have this in my collection. And if I want to do a look inspired by the ABH Prism palette, I'm going to choose this one over the Bad Habit dupe any day. All right, 2 more palettes, so we are getting there in this countdown. For the second place to the top, I have the Zulu by Juvia's Place palette. This was a really nice palette. I feel like it goes without saying to say that Juvia's Place eyeshadows are very good quality. I do not have any complaints when it comes to their mattes and their shimmers. Honestly, the only drawback to me is that I do have to use a glitter glue, and even with the glitter glue, I would say a little past halfway through the day, it does still transfer up into my crease just because they are so creamy and like smooth, so pigmented. But they are, once again, that type of formula that just transfers very easily. So if that bothers you, something to note. But like I said, I could use a glitter glue and it would keep it in place for a little over halfway through the day. Yeah, this is typical Juvia's Place quality. The mattes are very pigmented and they blend very nicely. The shimmers are really pretty. I like that this only has the 3 shimmers and then the rest are mattes, and very colorful mattes at that. I feel like the only issue I had is that I felt like I could have created more interesting looks and more variety of looks and more fun looks for me personally if I had another palette to go with this, because this honestly was a little constraining for me, because the deepest shade that I could really darken things up was either this brown or this purple, and the purple is more of like a vibrant type of purple. So you guys know, I feel like I'm a broken record. I like to really smoke out and deepen up my outer corner, so I felt like in that respect I was very limited with this palette. This is definitely more of a bright palette, so that was honestly the only issue. The only kind of con to this palette for me is that I really felt limited. Like either I could do something very sunset here, I could definitely go green, or I could kind of go pink and purple. And I mixed it up a couple times because I definitely was like, I'm not just gonna stick to the rose, that's too boring. And I mixed it up a little bit and I felt like I got some interesting looks. I one day tried to mix the brown and the purple together. I didn't like how they mixed. They didn't mix good at all. Overall though, I really didn't have any big complaints, and I thought the looks I created with this were really pretty. I definitely would like to do a palette bingo with this because I feel like it would be so fun and I would get a really interesting look, and I'm just curious to see what type of look I would get. I didn't have time to do it this month, but maybe if I do have time next month or in the future, I'll just pull it back out and do a quick little palette bingo because I just feel like this would be so very fun. But yeah. This was a really nice palette, but considering the other palette that I had to try this month, this definitely didn't get first place, but it came in at a close second because the quality of Juvia's Place and the fun colors of Juvia's Place, especially the Zulu palette, phenomenal. And very last up, coming in at number 1 for me this month, this totally blew the others out of the water and totally stole my heart, but it is the Tribe palette by Juvia's Place. I finally got it. And I couldn't be happier. I'm sure you've guessed it by now, but this is what is on my eyes today, and I'm just in love. I want to create looks with this every single day of my life. Okay, maybe by then I would be bored, but I can't remember how many looks I've created. 4, 5? I feel like it's still not enough. I still want to play with this, but it is just such a beautiful palette. I think it's absolutely my type of palette. I feel like if I could curate this palette to be like my perfect palette and my preferred colors, this would be the shadow that I would remove just because it is kind of the standard bronzy, dark bronze color, and considering everything else in this palette, I just feel like it's a little boring. Like the one time I used it, I was like, I gotta use it because I'm reviewing this, but I really don't want to because there's so many other fun things. So I kind of wish they would have taken that out and put something else more interesting in it. But honestly, that is seriously the only issue I have with this color layout, because besides that, this is beautiful. Same story as with the typical Juvia's Place. The mattes blend beautifully. The shimmers are gorgeous. They are so easy to swipe on your lid. You don't need to use them wet. They show up very metallic and very intense, but same as with the Zulu palette, I do have to put a glitter glue underneath or I will get a ton of transfer. So if you're someone who doesn't like like to see transfer or you don't want to bother with the glitter glue, maybe don't look into these palettes, because that is something I've seen across the board with all Juvia's Place palettes, is I cannot get them to not transfer by the end of the day. But besides that, lasting power, these babies do not move once you blend them in, especially the mattes. They're so gorgeous. Like, you put them on, and I do my eyes in the morning, and then 8, 9, 10, it varies, but I feel it's typically around 8 or 9. I wash my face off at the end of the night, and I look in the mirror and I get up close, and I can't detect any difference with any of the shadows. They look just the same as when I applied them, and I love that in a shadow. I love when they stay put and don't move all day. That's a good eyeshadow in my book. I feel like if I continue on, I'm just going to continue singing the praises of this palette, because there really isn't any cons to this palette. I just felt like it's really easy to work with. It's really beautiful. If you like the color story, you're not going to be disappointed with the quality of it. If there's any shadow that I feel like is weak, it would be this shade right here, simply because I feel like it is more sheer and I definitely have to build it up. I have it in my inner crease right there, and I definitely had to go back and forth building it up. It's definitely more of a sheer shadow, which I feel like is very different from most Juvia's Place. I mean, it looks very pigmented there, but if you actually look at it up close, like I can see my fingerprint through the swatch that I just did. So I hope that helps you, understand what I mean by sheer, because it's just, well, yeah, it's very bright and pigmented. It's a very sheer color. So even if you put on a very sticky base and whatnot, and even if you build it up, I just still feel like it's sheer and like see-through on my lid there. But like I said, that is really the only con. The first time I used this, which I did a first impressions, I can have it linked up here, but I cut the crease and then I packed this on the inner part of my lid, and it was very pigmented on top of a concealer. So if you want good pigment out of this, and if you're wanting to put it on your lid, I definitely recommend putting a concealer down to really give it that base that it needs to stand out, because then it looked gorgeous and there was no kind of sheerness to it. But yeah, overall, like I said, that's really the only con, is that one sheer shadow, but that doesn't take away from how amazing this palette is, and that doesn't mean that I don't like that shadow, because I definitely do. That is one of my favorite shadows in this palette. Well, this is definitely my top favorite, and then this is second favorite, and I actually really like this brown. This is a very like dirty poopy brown. Absolutely love it. So overall, I'm just so impressed. I love the packaging design for Juvia's Place. It's always very bright and eye-catching. I don't mind that there's not a mirror. That's something to note. I don't mind if it makes it more affordable, and these are pretty darn affordable. I think this was $20 and I got it on sale, I think for $14, which is a pretty good price, and you can always find sales, so I definitely say wait to purchase Juvia's until they're having a sale or until Ulta's having a sale, something like that. This isn't available at the Ulta website yet. It's coming. I bought this from the Juvia's Place website because I couldn't wait. But wait for a sale, because I feel like I frequently see like 30% off of these palettes, and then I got this for like 14 bucks. Amazing. But yeah, overall, this just blew all the other ones out of the water, because not only is it an outstanding formula, but it has the color shades that I absolutely love, and I had so much fun creating such green looks this month. Definitely my favorite of the month. It wins top spot, #1. This is amazing. Okay, gonna interrupt real quick. I was actually sitting here doing the swatches for the video when I realized I never addressed the remark I made about this being a little bit patchy when I put it in my outer corner. Now, that's what I said in my first impressions video of this palette, and I found that I used this probably at least three times in different looks. I used it today in my look, and I don't really see any patchiness anymore, so I don't know if it was just that day or maybe the way I was using it, but honestly, like, I've never noticed that issue of like, wait, I think it's a little bit patchy, but is it patchy? I really didn't see it anymore, so I think it was just that random occurrence of that day. Maybe my lids weren't as dry in that area and they just caught a little funky. I'm not sure what the deal was, but yeah, I just want to come back and address that, because I did point that out in my first impressions, and overall I didn't really have that issue anymore with that deepest, darkest shade in here, but I did want to address it so you guys didn't think I left you hanging. But anyway, let's continue on with the video. Alright, so there you have it. That is my palette palooza, my countdown for all my eyeshadow palettes from the month of February. I hope you guys enjoyed it and were able to get some good information on these palettes and whether they would be a good fit for you or not, or worth your purchase or not. But I just love talking about palettes, so I feel like I could be here all day talking about all these palettes and how much fun I had playing with them this month. But overall, I really enjoy sitting down and recording these videos, so I'm so glad that you guys like these palette paloozas. But anyway, I think that's gonna about wrap it up for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know down below if you tried any of these palettes out and what your experience was with them. But with all that said, I will see you very soon in my next video. Bye guys.